From the moment I could form memories, I knew I came second. Not in the petty, sibling rivalry kind of way. Number, I was born into a household where love came with conditions and attention was reserved for the one who could do no wrong. My little sister, Amy. I'm 28 now, but some memories still sting like fresh wounds. I remember my 5th birthday vividly. I had been so excited. My mom brought out a small store-bought cake with my name written in smudged icing. We had dinner at home, just the 4 of us. I was grateful, but also confused. You see, just 3 months earlier, Amy had turned 2. And for her party? My parents went all out. A bouncy castle in the backyard, professional face painters, a petting zoo, dozens of people. I asked my dad, why didn't I get that too? He ruffled my hair and said, "You're the big boy. You don't need all that to be happy." That sentiment would echo through every stage of my life. Growing up, Amy always got the newest toys while I was told to make do with what I had. I remember saving up allowance for nearly 6 months to buy a bike. I was 10, proud beyond words. But the moment Amy saw it, she cried. She wanted one too. And instead of teaching her patience or the value of saving, my parents drove out that very weekend and bought her a better one. A shiny pink model with a basket and streamers. Mine suddenly looked like junk next to hers. At school, I pushed myself hard. I wasn't a genius, but I was driven. Straight A's, math club president, first place in the regional science fair. My parents rarely showed up for ceremonies. Amy, on the other hand, got a new phone when she scored a B+ in her worst subject. When I starred in a school play, they arrived an hour late, missing my performance completely because Amy had a stomachache. They consoled her while I stood in the hallway still wearing my costume, heartbroken. I spent most of my teenage years trying to earn their pride. But the truth? It was never mine to earn. It was always reserved for Amy. She wasn't a bad sister, just compliant. She played the role they expected, helpless, sweet, in need of constant attention. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one. That meant fewer hugs, more expectations. "We count on you," my mom used to say when I came home from work and went straight to my homework. "Don't be like Amy," Dad warned whenever I asked for anything he thought was unnecessary. So I learned to shrink myself, to stop asking, to celebrate my wins alone. It wasn't until I got to college, away from their constant comparisons, that I realized the damage. I started having panic attacks. I would stay up at night, questioning my worth, wondering why nothing I did ever seemed to be enough. Therapy helped, slowly. It gave me the vocabulary to name what I'd been through. Emotional neglect, familial favoritism. It wasn't that I lacked love. It's that the love I craved from my parents was never available in the way I needed it. And the worst part, I still wanted it. Even now, at 28, with a good job in finance and a house I bought myself, a part of me still longs for my dad to say, "I'm proud of you." Or my mom to call, just to ask how I'm doing, not to ask for help with Amy, not to guilt trip me, but just to say she misses me. But that call never comes. What I didn't know then was that a storm was brewing. One final act of favoritism was coming, and it would test everything I thought I knew about family. When my grandfather passed away last fall, it shook something loose in me. He wasn't just my dad's dad. He was the one person in my family who consistently saw me, not the version of me shaped by expectation, but the boy who loved numbers and late-night puzzles, who dreamed of building something of his own. Grandpa was a self-made man, built his business from scratch, sold it in his 60s, and lived modestly even after becoming a millionaire. He had this quiet strength, and every time we talked, he made me feel like I mattered. So when the family gathered for the reading of his will, I was already emotional. I wasn't expecting anything, not really. Grandpa had 4 children and a dozen grandkids. I figured any inheritance would be modest, symbolic maybe. I was wrong. Grandpa had split his estate equally between all his grandchildren, me, Amy, and our cousins. The amount? $500,000. I nearly fell out of my chair. I was stunned, not just because of the money, but because of the message. Equal. Despite all the years of being overlooked by my own parents, here was someone saying, "You are just as worthy." But as I looked across the room, I saw the anger on my parents' faces, especially Dad's. His jaw was clenched, His hands were balled into fists on the table. Later that night, they pulled me aside. Mom was calm at first. "We think it's not fair," she said. "Amy needs it more." I blinked. "What?" "She's struggling," Dad added. "She's still living at home. She works part-time. This money could change her life." "And it could change mine too," I replied, trying to stay level. But more importantly, this was Grandpa's decision. He wanted us all to have the same chance. That's when the guilt tripping began. They brought up the braces I had as a teen, the school supplies they bought me, how they let me stay at home during college, as if those weren't basic responsibilities of parenthood. They made it sound like I owed them my future. "I'm not giving Amy my inheritance," I said, my voice trembling. "That money isn't yours to distribute." Dad's face went red. "You're being ungrateful, selfish." And just like that, the years of suppressed resentment came rushing back. Missed birthdays, skipped ceremonies, one-sided praise. The wound that never healed was ripped wide open. But things got even darker. A week later, Dad, as the executor of the will, declared that he was interpreting Grandpa's true wishes and planned to give my entire share to Amy. I was speechless. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was betrayal. Legal, emotional, and deeply personal. I tried to reason with them. I reminded them that Grandpa knew Amy's situation, and if he'd wanted to give her more, he would have said so. But Dad didn't budge. "You're disrespecting the dead," he snapped. He just didn't understand how hard things are for Amy. Amy stayed quiet during all of this. She shrugged when I confronted her. "Mom and Dad know best," she mumbled. That was the moment I realized I was on my own in this. I felt alone, cheated, and powerless, but I wasn't about to let my parents rewrite Grandpa's final act of fairness. I needed help, and I knew exactly where to turn. The next morning, I drove across town to see the one person I knew wouldn't sugarcoat the truth. My grandmother. She lived in the same house she and Grandpa had shared for over 50 years. Nothing extravagant. Just warm, familiar, the kind of place that smelled like old wood, fresh pie, and comfort. She welcomed me in with a long hug. I didn't even have to say much. She could feel something was wrong just from the way I sat down at her kitchen table, hunched over, my hands shaking as I wrapped them around a warm mug of tea. "They want to give my inheritance to Amy," I said. "Dad says Grandpa would have wanted it that way." The words hung in the air for a second before Grandma slowly placed her cup down. "That is not what your grandfather wanted," she said, her voice low but firm, not even close. She left the room for a moment and came back with a thick manila envelope. Inside were documents, notes, even a clause from Grandpa's will stating that any family member who contested the equal distribution would forfeit their share entirely. "I remember the day your parents tried to pressure him into changing the will," she continued. "It was 2 years ago. They wanted him to leave everything to Amy. Said she needed a lifeline. He said no. He told them every grandchild deserved a fair start." I sat there stunned. So it wasn't just favoritism. It was a premeditated attempt to shift Grandpa's legacy. "And Grandpa, he always believed in you," Grandma said, her eyes suddenly soft. "He told me how proud he was when you got that scholarship. He kept every article about you, every photo." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a worn scrapbook, clippings of my science fair wins, printouts of my college acceptance letters, even a program from the Harvard summer program they never cared to ask about. I stared at the pages, emotions crashing over me like a tidal wave. "He was paying attention," I whispered. "He always was," she replied. I left her house that day with more than documents. I left with a renewed sense of clarity. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my place in a family that tried to erase me. Grandma didn't waste time. She called the attorney listed in the will. Then she called my dad's siblings, my aunts and uncles who, over the years, had witnessed the quiet favoritism but rarely spoke about it. Now they were outraged. Within the week, a formal challenge was filed to strip my dad of his role as executor. Grandma made it clear that if they tried to reinterpret Grandpa's wishes, they'd lose their shares too. The family tension hit a boiling point. My parents accused me of betrayal. "You're tearing the family apart," my mom cried. "You're turning everyone against us." But it wasn't me. It was the truth finally coming to light. Amy stayed silent, shrinking into the background like she always did when things got hard. I tried talking to her, hoping maybe she'd stand with me, but all she said was, "This isn't my fault. I didn't ask for this." And maybe that was true, but doing nothing was a choice too. For the first time, I felt the lines being drawn, not just in a legal battle, but in the emotional blueprint of our family. And I wasn't going to step back into the shadows. Not anymore. The week that followed felt like walking through a minefield. Every phone call, every text, carried the weight of decades of unspoken resentment. And when the legal documents were delivered to my dad, officially removing him as executor of Grandpa's estate, all hell broke loose. He showed up at my house unannounced, slamming the door so hard it echoed through the walls. "You really went that far?" he barked. "You couldn't just talk to me like a man? You had to drag everyone else into this." I stayed calm. "You tried to steal my inheritance, Dad. Grandpa's inheritance. That's not a conversation, that's theft." His eyes flared. "Amy needs it more, she's struggling." "And I've been struggling too," I said. "You just never cared to notice." His voice dropped, lower and more bitter. "This is what happens when you turn your back on family." I remember the silence that followed, the realization that he didn't see the irony in what he was saying, that he had already turned his back on me years ago. By the weekend, the fallout was impossible to contain. Word spread through our extended family. A few cousins reached out, quietly saying they supported me. Others stayed neutral, afraid to take sides. But my aunts and uncles, Dad's own siblings, were furious. They knew what he had tried to do. And now that Grandma had confirmed it, there was no hiding behind excuses anymore. Then came the dinner party. It was supposed to be a casual family gathering at my Aunt Linda's house. I wasn't going to go, but Grandma insisted. "Let people see the truth with their own eyes," she said. So I went. I didn't even get my coat off before my mom stormed into the room, tears in her eyes. "How could you do this to us? How could you make your father look like a thief in front of everyone?" I tried to stay calm, but I could feel the room tightening, people turning to listen. "I didn't make him look like anything. His actions did that." And then she did it. She picked up an old photo album from the coffee table and flung it at my feet. "That's who we were," she cried. "A family, before you decided to ruin it." The air left the room. I looked down at the album, the pictures spilling across the floor, birthday parties I barely remembered, holidays where I stood off to the side while Amy took center stage. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's who we were, but not who we are." It took everything in me not to cry, not because I was angry, but because I was grieving something I had clung to for too long, the hope that one day they'd finally see me. I picked up the album, handed it back, and walked out. That night, Grandma called me. "You did the right thing," she said. "It hurts now, but you're breaking the cycle. You're teaching them that love isn't control, that fairness matters." And for the first time, I believed her. 2 weeks passed after the dinner blow-up. I hadn't spoken to my parents since, but one rainy Tuesday evening, I got a knock at my door. It was Amy. She looked different, not in the way someone changes their hairstyle or wardrobe, but in the way someone carries themselves when they've been wrestling with hard truths. "I don't want to argue," she said quietly. "Can we talk?" We sat at my kitchen table, just the two of us, for the first real conversation we'd had in years without our parents' influence shaping the air between us. She reached for her tea, hands trembling slightly. "I want to say I'm sorry," she began, voice cracking, "for not standing up for you sooner, for letting Mom and Dad make you feel like you didn't matter." I didn't speak right away. I just let her talk, really talk, for the first time. "I always knew they treated me differently," she said, "but I thought it meant I was special. It wasn't until you fought back that I realized it meant they never taught me how to live without them. I don't know how to be my own person." Her honesty knocked the breath out of me. For years, I had carried this image of Amy as the favored child who got everything handed to her. And in many ways, she did, but I never considered the silent cost, her own identity smothered by their overprotection. She told me Grandma had sat her down, walked her through the history of what our parents had done, not just to me, but to her. How they'd crippled her ability to trust herself, how their love came with invisible chains. "I've enrolled at the community college," Amy said, her eyes shining now. "I'm starting with general eds, and if I can keep up, I'll transfer in 2 years. I want to earn something that's mine, finally." I felt tears welling up, not from sadness this time, but something closer to relief. Not just for her, but for the small part of me that still wanted a sister. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "You have no idea how much this means." We talked for hours that night, about the past, the future, the childhoods we never really shared, and when she left, she hugged me like someone letting go of old ghosts. Not long after, I got a message from Mom. It was short. "I've started therapy. I'd like to talk when you're ready." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready, but it was a start. Dad, on the other hand, stayed silent, still convinced he was the victim, still refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. I'd heard through an uncle that he was threatening to write both Amy and me out of his will now. For the first time in my life, I didn't care. Because for once, I wasn't chasing their love. I wasn't measuring my worth by their approval. I had stood up for myself, claimed what was rightfully mine, and helped my sister do the same, and it felt freeing. There's still a long way to go. The family is fractured. Holidays will be awkward. Some wounds will take years to heal, if they ever do. But for now, I've built something new. Amy and I meet for coffee every Friday. We talk like equals. We dream out loud. We plan for things our parents never believed we could do on our own. And every time we sit down together, I remember something Grandma once told me. Justice doesn't always heal the hurt, but it does restore your dignity. Weeks passed, and slowly the rhythm of my life began to shift. Friday coffee with Amy became the one thing I looked forward to. Each time we met, I could see her becoming more grounded, more confident. She had signed up for classes, made new friends at school, and even started working on weekends at a local bookstore to help pay her tuition. She was finally building her own identity, and I couldn't have been prouder. But healing wasn't just happening on her end. One day, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. In today's world, that alone felt like a moment from another time. It was from Mom. Her handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in a few places, like she had cried while writing it. "I was wrong," the letter began. "I see that now. For years I told myself that loving you both meant treating you differently based on your needs, but I see now that I confused love with control. And I hurt you. I hurt both of you." She talked about how, in therapy, she had been unpacking the patterns from her own childhood, how she had always felt like the invisible sibling growing up, and in some twisted way, she tried to rewrite that narrative through Amy. She said she was sorry for the birthdays missed, the plays ignored, the scholarships dismissed like they were nothing. She remembered all of it now, and it haunted her. At the end, she wrote something I never thought I'd hear from either of my parents. "You deserved better, and I'm sorry I didn't give it to you." I sat with that letter for a long time. No theatrics, no big reaction, just silence, and then I cried. Not because it fixed everything, but because for once, someone in my family acknowledged the truth. Mom and I met for lunch the next week. It was cautious at first, measuring every word like stepping across a frozen lake. But we talked, really talked, about childhood, about Amy, about the rift between us. She admitted that she couldn't change the past, but she wanted a different future, if I would let her earn it. I told her I needed time, boundaries, trust built slowly, not demanded. And to her credit, she nodded and said she understood. Dad, however, was a different story. When he heard about Mom's lunch with me, he exploded. Apparently, he still believed I had manipulated Grandma, poisoned Amy, and shattered the family to grab the money. He told an uncle that he didn't raise a traitor. His words, not mine. He refused to come to family events if I was present. Even Amy wasn't spared. He accused her of being brainwashed. The more she stood up for herself, the more distant he became. But the truth? I no longer needed his approval. I'd stopped chasing it the day he tried to steal what Grandpa had rightfully left me. That day, I chose self-worth over silence. It still hurt. I won't lie. There are nights I lie awake remembering the times I tried to impress him with science fair trophies, report cards, internships, and got nothing but a distracted nod or a gruff "good job." And now, when I finally say no more, he acts like I'm the villain. But I'm not the broken child anymore. In fact, for the first time in my life, I'm learning how to stand tall without needing anyone's permission to do so. Amy and I are healing, Mom is trying, and Dad? Well, he has his own demons to wrestle with. But as for me, I'm finally stepping out of the shadows and into a future I'm proud to call mine. It was a rainy Sunday morning when Amy knocked on my door, drenched and trembling, not from the cold, but from what she had just walked away from. She had finally moved out of our parents' basement. She stood there, hugging a canvas tote filled with her essentials, a laptop, a hoodie, a few notebooks. I let her in without saying a word. We both knew what this moment meant. It wasn't just about finding a place to crash. It was about her choosing independence, for the first time in her life. She sat on my couch, dripping onto a throw blanket, and stared ahead. Then, in a voice I almost didn't recognize, she said, "I told them I'm not their puppet anymore." She had told them about her decision to go back to school full-time and rent her own place with roommates. Dad lost it. He called her ungrateful, said she was throwing away her life by chasing a meaningless degree. Mom cried, begged her to reconsider, but Amy stood her ground. "I learned it from you," she whispered to me. "You showed me how to stop begging for love." I don't think I've ever felt pride like that before. That week, Amy moved into a shared apartment near campus. It wasn't fancy. 2 roommates, a tiny room, a mattress on the floor, but she said it felt like freedom, like breathing on her own for the first time. I helped her hang up a string of fairy lights, and when we stepped back to look at them, she grinned. "It's not much, but it's mine." Our bond was growing, and we found comfort in creating rituals together. Sunday coffee runs, late-night chats about childhood wounds, laughing about the absurdity of being pit against each other for decades. We mourned the years lost to competition that wasn't ours to begin with. Meanwhile, Mom continued reaching out. She started sending texts, small gestures, a picture of our old dog, a memory from when I was a kid, an invitation to lunch. She was trying, in her own cautious way, to reconnect. I accepted, but always with boundaries. She apologized again, less performative this time. "I know I can't erase the pain," she told me during one of our walks, "but I want to be someone you don't flinch from." It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Dad, on the other hand, was doubling down. He didn't just skip family events. I heard from one cousin that he refused to even say my name anymore. At one point, he tried to rally relatives to write me letters about the importance of family unity. None of them did. Some told me outright that they admired what I had done, that they too had been tired of the charade. My therapist calls it mourning the parent you never had. I'm starting to understand what she means. One day, I visited Grandma. She had tea ready, a photo album spread across the table. In it were clippings, my old math competition certificates, a grainy picture of me on stage from that play they missed, even a thank you note I'd written her in middle school. "He kept every bit of you," she said. "Don't ever think he didn't see you." I sat in her kitchen, holding that album like it was gold. My grandfather, gone now, had seen the worth in me that my parents were too blind or too biased to recognize. That afternoon, I left her house with something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. As a kid, I clung to it, maybe because it was the one time of year I thought my family might feel whole, at least on the surface. The smell of roasted turkey, the clatter of mismatched plates, Grandma's pecan pie cooling on the windowsill, it used to feel like a promise. But now it felt like a test. This year was the first time I chose not to attend the family gathering. Mom invited me, said Dad wouldn't be there anyway. "He's going hunting with some friends," she texted. "Amy will be here. I'd really love it if you came." I sat with that text for hours, staring at it like it might bite. Amy called me later that evening. "I'm not going either," she said quietly. "Grandma and I are doing something small. She asked if you'd join us." And just like that, I had a new plan, a small table, 2 women I loved, and no pretending. We spent Thanksgiving afternoon in Grandma's cozy living room, the fireplace crackling. Amy brought a homemade sweet potato casserole from a recipe she found online. Grandma insisted on cooking the turkey herself, seasoned just like Grandpa used to do it. And I brought wine, maybe too much, but no one complained. We talked about everything and nothing, laughed at old stories, cried a little too. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was performing. I wasn't trying to be the good son or the forgotten one, or the reasonable sibling. I was just me, and it was enough. That night, Grandma gave us each an envelope. Inside were handwritten letters from Grandpa, written shortly before he passed. I hadn't known they existed. Mine read, "You've always carried more than your share, and I saw it, even when others didn't. I hope you never doubt your worth. You're not just strong, you're kind, and that's rare. Use what I've left you to build a life that feels true to you. And please help Amy find her way too. She'll need you, even if she doesn't say it out loud." I read that letter 3 times, hands shaking. It felt like closure, like a door had quietly, firmly shut behind me. Later that week, I met Amy for coffee and we talked about what came next. She was doing well in her classes, actually excited about her coursework. She even applied for a work-study job at the campus counseling center. "I think I want to help people figure their lives out," she said, "like you helped me figure out mine." That moment cracked something open in me, not in a painful way, but in a freeing way. All these years I had carried resentment for being overlooked, but now I saw something deeper. I hadn't just broken a cycle, I had given someone else the courage to break theirs too. Mom has kept reaching out. She's still in therapy, still trying. We've had lunch a few times. There's progress, even if it's slow. As for Dad, I don't know. He hasn't spoken to me since I accepted the inheritance. Maybe he never will. Maybe that's okay. I used to think healing meant fixing everything. Now I understand. It means choosing what you carry forward and what you leave behind. So here I am, almost 29, no longer waiting for my parents' validation to feel whole. I've got a sister who's becoming my friend again, a grandma who never stopped believing in me, and a future that finally feels like it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, that's more than enough.